Okay, so today's session, Environmental Justice and CED, Approaches to Affordable Housing, is brought to you by the Canadian Community Economic Development Network. As some of you know, it's made up of several hundred community organizations and individuals working to create local economic opportunities and opportunities designed and working at supporting an inclusive and sustainable economy. You can see some of the members' logos there. And here on the next slide, you can see an image of the member map that's been developed recently. So, you know, you can find members close to you on the map, located at the web addresses listed at the bottom of the screen. And if you like the session today, just consider joining, becoming a member. You can sign up for free newsletters or follow CEDNet on social media. CEDNet has done a number of webinars like this one in the last several years. Some of the topics covered you can see there. They're all available on the website, free to members. And so I think we're ready to go. So welcome again. And yeah, my granddaughter took that particular shot not too far from where I lived for 3 decades. In any case, today's webinar is divided into 2 parts. And we're going to start with Aaron, but Aaron and Sean both will speak. They'll speak for about 15 minutes. In the second part, we'll pick up on some of the questions you posted on the chat box. And once again, feel free to post those questions and comments and any other information you'd like to share in the chat box at any time. So just before we get into the presentation, starting with Aaron, let's get to know each other a little bit better. There's a couple of polls here. So you'll see 2 of them pop up on the screen, and just answer both of them if you would. In terms of what areas you're currently working in, you just select all that apply. And the second one, just a really short little answer about what it is you'd like to learn today. Okay, so while you're doing that, let me just introduce the session. We're facing lots of challenges environmentally today. How we actually might transform our economies to reduce carbon and pollution, use less land, regrow and restore natural spaces and ecosystems. These are all major challenges. And within this context, obviously there's a lot of talk about green jobs. And these are increasingly moving into the center of economic development conversations in all kinds of settings. Community economic development is a way of locating and building strategies that can be used to help ensure that the benefits of green economy are shared with and are inclusive of those that are often left out of the mainstream economy. There is opportunities for creating a new kind of synergy here. Now, this webinar is going to feature 2 organizations that are taking a community economic development approach and who are linking green solutions to their work in both poverty reduction and affordable housing. One is called Building Urban Industries for Local Development. It's a social enterprise in Winnipeg, providing trade-based training for people with limited formal labor market experience. And they're linking that training and leadership development with retrofitting homes in a variety of different ways, and also a lot of work on water and energy saving devices. So we'll hear from Sean second on the list. We're going to start with People's United for Sustainable Housing, which is based in Buffalo. And it's a local membership-based community organization essentially fighting to make affordable housing a reality in one part of the city. Push Buffalo has been active in a variety of areas, including reclaiming empty homes for redevelopment as low-income housing, and as you'll find out, some really innovative and interesting work in retrofitting housing, both as a job generator, a carbon reducer, and a revitalization instrument. So, now before we get to the presentation, let's check back on the poll results here. Okay, so a majority of people are hooked in with social enterprise, environmental justice, less so. So yeah, there's quite a retrofit. So there's going to be some really interesting to see how your response to these two presentations helps increase the sense of how you might, where you're working, link your efforts up to environmental justice and housing retrofits, which are two kind of key dimensions to what we're dealing with today. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first presenter. Aaron is from Buffalo. Over the years, he's organized labor, student campaigns for economic justice, living wage campaigns, the Boston Justice for Janitors strike. He sounds like a bit of an organizer, to say the least. He's also, though, a graduate of the Harvard Law School and has appeared in major media outlets in the United States as an advocate for low-income individuals. I know you're going to really be inspired and stimulated by what he has to say, so without any further ado, take it away, Aaron.
Well, first, thanks for having me, of course, and just to situate folks a little bit and sort of underscore the opportunity for binational collaboration here. I'm located on the west side of Buffalo, right in Push's headquarters, and at the end of the block, I can see 40 area. We're right at the base of the Peace Bridge on the Niagara River. So we're a riverfront community, and we're a post-industrial community. As you probably know, Buffalo was hard hit by the decline of heavy industry in the U.S. and lost about 200,000 jobs regionally that were high-wage union jobs. And so the context that we stepped into 11, 12 years ago when we were getting started was a struggling working-class community that had depopulated and thus had begun to experience a crisis of vacancy and abandonment and declining conditions generally, commercial abandonment. And at the residential level, we were at about 25% and spiraling downward. And so we're also had become over the decades a highly diverse community from a racial and ethnic standpoint. Historically, an Italian-American working class community, but with a very strong history of a Puerto Rican working class that had come for the steel mills, and then subsequently a large African-American community. And then just about 25 years ago, our neighborhood became a site of refugee resettlement from around the world. So we have in both of our high schools more than 50 languages spoken, and major populations from the Burmese ethnic groups, Somalia, Sudan, Liberia, 7 other African states. So that's our context. And if we go to the next slide here, I always like to start with the slide of mobilization and people, because at the roots of our organization is the notion of power building at the grassroots, base building, leadership development, leadership identification. In this picture, we're at the historic climate march that we had in New York City about a year ago, 400,000 people in the streets around climate change and really the opportunities and the challenges that frontline communities face particularly. And we'd seen some of those impacts in places like New Orleans and the outer boroughs of New York. So our members mobilized for that march, and really brought together a lot of strands of what PUSH is about, using the hope and vision of resilience as a tool not only for building power but also for building community wealth. And so we go to the next slide. As we got started, we knew that we were going to root ourselves in the tradition of community organizing and really analyzing power and fighting for resources and fighting back against institutions that were sucking wealth from the west side of Buffalo. But we also wanted to learn more about the community economic development and housing traditions. At one point in the U.S. context, they had been tied together more tightly in the 60s as they emerged. And then they'd become sort of bifurcated, where housing development had become professionalized and kind of distanced from any sense of building power or organization. So our effort was to reunite those traditions, and part of the way we do that is a lot of community planning around our project. So this here, this slide is planning for a park, a derelict piece of land right in the center of our community. And we do this in a pretty iterative way around whatever project is at the forefront. So the past year, it's been the conversion of a vacant school on the western edge of our district. This is a look at our district. We started with the notion that a place-based strategy could have impacts far beyond the place. So we knew that we wanted to root ourselves in the community on the west side. Built a board, a group of members and leaders by doing door-to-door organizing 11, 12 years ago, and many of those leaders are still on the board or heavily engaged in the organization. And where we are 12 years later is, in these 25 blocks, the organization owns outright about 110 parcels of property, and we've developed, I think it's 83 units of affordable housing that we own, and then we've impacted about 150 to 200 other structures through retrofits in this district. And we have also used the district as a laboratory for green infrastructure, so we've piloted a lot of rain gardens, bioswales, green roofs, as well as urban agriculture with our partner in the Massachusetts Avenue Project, which had been in place prior to our founding. And also for job training in the various sectors that we operate in. So that's just a picture of a typical long-term vacant structure. You can see, the asbestos siding on the structure. This particular structure had been vacant. The units, the apartments have been vacant up all the way back to the 50s. We're finding Korean War newsprint in the building as we did the interior demolition. And through a community planning process, and really this property had been devalued so much that we were picking up parcels like this for less than $10,000. And I should say, along with the vacancy crisis, on the eastern edge of the neighborhood was a gentrified district called Elmwood Village, which is one of our least vacant and most prosperous neighborhoods in Buffalo. So we always knew we were being buffeted by these two trends, the money to the east of us, and then the vacancy that was happening at the same time. That's just a picture of, post-renovation. So again, we have multiple tracks. One track would be we purchase the property outright and manage the development of the property, which we did in this case. And now this is 5 units of affordable rental housing with a storefront that we use as a community meeting space. I'll talk about other tracks where we don't own the property a little bit later. Early on, we, again, recognized that the affordable housing development community in the U.S., and I can't speak to Canada, had really become divorced from community process when it came to hiring and training local workers. You often hear that the excuse that affordable housing nonprofits do housing, not job training. And while there's definitely some truth to that, we really wanted to challenge the idea that our houses couldn't be built by people living in the community. So we've always had a training track, and we've always had a dedicated house that serves as our training house. We've also, from the get-go, thought about what it would mean to build a neighborhood of the future, and now really have gone full into thinking about resilience at every step of the way. And sometimes that means experimentation. So this is a vacant lot between two houses that we own. We purchased the lot for $500 and built a geothermal heating field in that vacant lot. And I think we're just at the stage now where we're looking to scale up our renewables. We have 3 solar arrays and 3 more on the way, and we're looking to do a lot more, and I'll speak about that a little bit later in our community enterprise discussion. Just an aerial picture of our net zero house, which again is a affordable housing unit right in the middle of the west side. Urban land and farming is a big part of PUSH. This had also been a derelict piece of land, and we built a 27-plot community garden that is oversubscribed. In fact, we have another one this size just down the street, and they're both oversubscribed. It's sort of at the beginning to middle of the growing season. This particular piece of land gets a lot of, each plot is controlled by a family. We have a very wide array, a very diverse group of gardeners on this particular plot, a lot of folks coming from refugee situations and bringing their own agricultural traditions. This is another garden, and the folks depicted in the picture, Jen McCosey and Tato Rivera, represent 2 different types of leadership within PUSH. On the right, Jen became a board member. She'd been cooking in Greek diners for most of her adult life, and became a board member of PUSH, and now is on staff leading our logistics and kind of planning function. And then Tato Rivera is a leader in the sense that he's one of our expert gardeners and shares a lot of his agricultural knowledge. Another picture of youth in the gardens. This is a look at a specific intervention around rain gardens and green infrastructure. Buffalo's under a federal order to reduce the amount of stormwater going into the Niagara River and Lake Erie, both binational bodies of water. And we have seized that opportunity to really demonstrate that water can be soaked up and made more permeable in the neighborhood, and employing community residents to do it. So this has become a social enterprise for us that we call PUSH Blue. We now have a large contract with the city to do vacant lot rain garden installations across the city. We're doing 240 over a year and a half. We've completed about 80 of those thus far. That's a look at the core crew of rain garden installers, and also they build green roofs and do work, any type of work that creates permeable surfaces, also deep paving. That's the small park that I mentioned that we planned and built through a community process. And then another social enterprise is PUSH Green, and that's our weatherization and now solar aggregation program. And this serves areas far beyond our district. It serves the whole county, in fact, another county. And it's a pretty cool program design where we serve as marketers and program advocates in the program, enrolling people and helping them through their process. And then we also aggregate households in groups of 10 to 15 and pass them off to contractors who have agreed to high labor standards and have agreed to hire locally, and with whom we have a strong relationship. So it creates a workforce pipeline, lowers utility bills, and so forth. And we've completed our 500th home just in the past few months. So the program's about 4.5 years old. So we're at about 100 homes a year or so, and hoping to go up from there. We've, as I mentioned, just added solar as a product that can be aggregated as well. So we're aggregating solar rooftop installations, providing discounts to customers, and have that same workforce pipeline. We've had 9 trainees hired full-time in the last 6 months as solar installers. And just bringing it back, and no, I need to wind up here, but bringing it back to the core focus of push on building power and confronting institutions that are wedded to extractive practices, whether it's the extraction of unsustainable carbon fuels or labor extraction. We've always been able to have campaigns that confront injustices, environmental injustices and social injustices while we're doing the social enterprise, and we've learned over the years that those two can be symbiotic. So we've had a long campaign against the misallocation of funds by a large utility that were earmarked for conservation purposes and really ended up serving their brand purposes of the corporation, and we're able to steer about $20 million away from those branding efforts into low-income housing retrofits in several communities across the state. So right now we have campaigns around a banking merger that would have a negative impact on our community, as well as having a big seat at the table in the planning process around the future of solar and weatherization across the state. And that's focused on the state government. So just a few impacts. In our zone, we've invested about $25 million in affordable housing. As I mentioned, beyond our zone, completed more than 500 retrofits, and we've won through campaigns $90 million in new commitments to retrofits and weatherization. And we've also won a more neighborhood-focused and community-based housing policy. It's turned away from demolition and towards holistic improvements in communities. And we continue to have impacts on carbon reduction. What this doesn't speak to is the growing social enterprises we have in sustainable landscaping, the Push Blue that I mentioned. We're also making our own compost now and beginning to sell that, as well as some microgreens. We're always looking to continue to grow. So I will leave it the introduction at that, and look forward to engaging in questions in the second half.
Well, thank you so much. That was just fascinating. I mean, you're bringing all the pieces together, and I mean, territorial focus, yet cutting across energy, food, housing, energy conservation, renewables, and very impressed with the consciousness and level of organizing, which to me really stands out. I mean, there's resistance, and there's building, and there's advocacy, and it seems to me all those things are embedded in this story in a way that's very instructive. Thank you very much, Aaron, for that.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we get into questions for Aaron, we're just going to provide the time for Sean Hogan, who is stepping in at the last minute for the Executive Director of BUILD. Sean's the production manager at BUILD, and BUILD is well known in Canada CED circles. It's an award-winning social enterprise and training program in Winnipeg's North End, and since 2014, Sean has been leading the social enterprise teams of BUILD, basically helping navigate the challenging waters of professional contracting, as well as looking for new ways to create training and employment opportunities for individuals that have multiple employment barriers. He's a husband, a father, and a children's entertainer, so multi-talented and diverse. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you.
You take her away now.
Howdy, everybody. Yeah, so this is, I'm very last minute jumping in here, so bear with me. And bear with me if I cough a lot. I'm struggling with the plague that seems to have descended upon Winnipeg that everybody's struggling with. Yeah, so BUILD stands for Building Urban Industries for Local Development. As we just heard, that we're a training program and a social enterprise. I guess there's two arms to BUILD. The first one is training, and the second is our social enterprise. So this is our 10-year anniversary. We started in 2006, and the idea with Build was we're located in the second poorest postal code in all of Canada, in Winnipeg North End. We've been in economic depression for I don't know what, 30 years, something like that. There's a lot of bleakness, but there's also a very strong community in the North End. The idea, our former executive director, Sean Loney, he talks a lot about how the same amount of money is sent out of our province every year on natural gas heat out of the province into the pockets of oil companies as is paid into taxes to our provincial government every year, a ridiculous amount of money, and a lot of that is because we have old housing stock. And people don't have the money in order to retrofit it. So in the North End, we have old houses, and they're all crappy, and people don't have the ability to fix them up, but also people don't have jobs. And so taking the problem of employment, people who need jobs and jobs that need to be done, and putting those things together, that simple marriage is where Build came from. So on the slide you see here, you see that we talk about utility bill reductions. We've had a very strong partnership with two Crown corporations, one of them Manitoba Housing, and which is the largest property owner in Manitoba, the province that we're from. They're our public housing organization. And an excellent partnership with Manitoba Hydro, which is our electricity utility, and they've developed over the years. They've developed strategies in order to reduce spending into. Sorry, the noise in the background. I've got a toddler upstairs who seems to have discovered his train tracks. They've developed strategies in order to decrease the amount of money that's being spent into utilities. One of the struggles that we have is currently our installation teams is that we discover these houses that are really falling apart, and part of the reason is that people are spending $800, $1,000 plus a month on heat alone, and so they can't keep up with their utility bills, but they also can't keep up with fixing their houses because their money is all going into utilities. And so I'll get to that in a couple minutes with our installation team. Also training. So the story of a trainee with Bill is we get about 100 to 200 applicants a month, people looking for work, mostly Aboriginal individuals, and every 2 months we're able to take about 12. So the need is massive for work. And our ability to take people and train people is not huge. But we do what we can, and we try to scale up as much as we can. Previously, we were able to secure a fairly sizable contract for training with the federal government, where we were able to take 100 trainees at a time, I believe. And the vast majority of the installation work that we did was under that contract, and we made a massive impact on the utilities in the province. In 2006, we got a pilot project going where we did 120 homes in Winnipeg North End. And I believe it was under a program called the Low Income Energy Project, where Manitoba Hydro would subsidize the work. I saw a couple questions over whether Aaron's groups whether they charge, whether they're cheaper than professional contractors. Build, our philosophy is that we charge contractor rates. We only ask for what would have been paid to professional contractors for all the work that we do, insulation work, renovation work, anything. The 120 homes, it was a very successful program, which led to a long-term partnership with Manitoba Housing and Manitoba Hydro. As you can see, the impact that happened, we only have stats here on this slide that tracks up to 2013. 2013, end of 2013, beginning of 2014, that's when our federal funding ended, and we scaled down to the size that we are right now. However, in that time, we were able to insulate almost every property for Manitoba housing, which is a massive impact, like thousands of houses, of basements and attics. We weren't doing exterior walls at that point. We were doing just basements and attics, and the money that the government was able to save, because these utilities are paid for by taxpayers, was a sizable amount, all done by community members who, for the most part, have not had work or had jobs in the past. Our crews are led by professional contractors who are on staff, oftentimes journey people, and our crew, our labor force is made up of trainees, people who've not had work. Anyone who comes into Build, they get 2 months of in-class training before they ever hit a job site. So in that in-class training section, they get math, trades math every morning, so things that are going to be very applicable on a job site, how to read a tape measure and how to cut properly. Then they're going to get software development. They're going to get things like money management and parenting and coping with stress. They're going to get safety training. They get their WMIS. They get fall protection, confined space, which really comes in handy when we're insulating crawl spaces and attics. Scaffold training. And then in the afternoons they get workshop class, where they're going to get. We have a workshop where we have mock walls built and people learn how to do the things that they're going to experience on the job. So the last 4 months with people on the job. Yes, everything is paid. That's a good question. This is a job. This is people's first job. Everybody gets paid for their time in class. Then they join our professional crews, and they're running professional contracts. And these are some of these jobs. For the most part, they're worked in partnership with either Manitoba Housing or Manitoba Hydro, which are very, very supportive partners with us, or private contracts, which we secure as well. Some of it was with other nonprofit housing groups. We try to focus a lot on nonprofit housing groups because it really does make an emotional impact on our trainees to work in areas where it's part of their community. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. So if we're talking about the environment, the first thing that we did was insulation, which made a great big impact. The second thing we did was water retrofits within Manitoba Housing. Right now in Canada, we have done more water retrofits than any other contractor in Canada. Well, the water retrofit essentially is replacing high volume toilets with low flow toilets, shower heads, putting low flow shower heads, and installing aerators, evaporators, and swaps. At the time we were doing swapping out light bulbs with CFLs. We installed every toilet in Manitoba Housing. Massive savings for the taxpayers. And there's this great big lake called Falcon Lake. The thing that we talk about a lot is that we would have overflowed Falcon Lake probably twice or 3 times at this point with the amount of water that was saved. And in 2013, the province of Manitoba honored Build with on World Water Day with the impact that Build made towards water savings. As you can see on this slide, if you squint real hard, or if you have a bigger screen than I do, you can see the amount of money that was saved, which was by 2013, $4 million. Since then, we at that point had installed 6,800 toilets, and we've done considerably more now. We finished Manitoba. Part of the struggle with securing work, environmental work, like insulation and water retrofits, is that we've done it. we've done the toilets. We may go back and do 3-liter toilets at this point because the technology has improved with Manitoba Housing. But within Manitoba Housing, we've installed all the toilets at this point. We've done some of the other nonprofit housing groups as well in order to help decrease their water bills as well. Work is it's a good question about work. We do get money for salaries of trainees because trainees, when they come to us, they're not obviously working at the pace of a professional contractor. But for the work itself, whoever contracts us, they pay the bills. So nobody's and people aren't getting. Every once in a while, we'll do give someone a deal, but we're charging market rates for the work that we do. And the majority of the work that we do these days is in apartment renovation. The third environmental wing that we've done with at Build is a small pilot project that we did called Drain Water Heat Recovery. And this may turn into something, it may not. It's installing, it's a passive technology. It's cutting into the main drain stack of homes. Whenever you take a shower, the heat from that hot water just disappears into the ground. It goes down your drain stack and disappears into the sewer system. So we cut I think it's a 3 or 4 foot section out of the drain stack, and we install one of these copper pipes. At the bottom is your cold water intake from the city sewer system, the city water system. It coils around the new drain stack, which is made of copper, which is a great heat conductor. And then by the time it leaves the coil at the top, it's not water mixing, it's just metal to metal touching. By the time it leaves the top of the pipe, the water comes in in Winnipeg at about 3 to 5 degrees, and it leaves at about 20 to 25 degrees, that's in Celsius. And then it hits your hot water tank, and the hot water tank doesn't have to use as much energy to raise the temperature. So there's obviously a savings on that. We have a partnership with Manitoba Hydro where they have a thing called the Pay As You Save or PAYS program, where it's a cost-neutral install for homeowners. We would install this thing, and Manitoba Hydro would use it under their PAYS financing. So their electrical bill would stay exactly the same, but until the cost of this thing is paid off, and then they would enjoy the long-term savings. And takes, I don't know, like 5 years or something like that for it to get paid down. Manitoba Hydro, their programs are innovative and super supportive of things like social enterprise. Right now, the installation work we do with them is through a thing called the Affordable Energy Program. If your income doesn't meet a certain threshold and your home is in need of insulation, the homeowner can opt into this program, and the program is it pays for insulation for people, and that's on walls, attics, and foundations in crawl spaces or on basement walls. It's a really great program. Oftentimes, the people who opt, and these are private homeowners who opt into this program, they will often choose Build to do the work because we're community members, and because like we've had homes that are owned by our trainees or trainees' families that we've done this work on. The homes, for the most part, are in terrible shape, and most other contractors don't want to do it. And the reason is because for 20 years, all of their money's been going into their utilities, and they've not been able to upkeep their homes at all. So once we go in, installation bills go from $1,000 a month to $150 a month or $200 a month, and suddenly people have extra income and they can begin to improve their living their living conditions.
We're getting close there, Sean. So
am I running out of time?
The last slide, I think. Yeah, a little bit. You're just going over now. Let's just finish up this slide. That's great.
I'm sorry. I'm a bit long-winded.
No problem. I know. I'm much more long-winded, actually.
The big thing. So we don't have a massive environmental push on Build right now. Our big thing is employment. Employment is the most important thing that we aim for. because we know that so many problems are solved by employment, and that's desperately needed in North End. However, we still do look for jobs that will have an environmental impact, and that's the reason we keep doing insulation. The profit margins on the affordable energy program are super duper lean. It is difficult to make your nut. However, we keep doing it because we know that it has a positive environmental impact in the neighborhood, in the community, and it really does help people. And it's work that no one else is going to do. Like, if Bill doesn't do it, other people are going to write off these houses. Our trainees, our stats are about 40% go straight into the labor market straight after they leave Bill. 40% go into the labor market after a delay, and about 20% go back to school. And like, for the most part, people have not finished school, but with the math classes with us, they get their essential skills assessment, their ESA, and they often will actually go straight to community college without even finishing high school. So that's Build in a nutshell. I hope that helps. Here's a picture of some of our trainees from our first year insulating a basement, and you can see that even someone brought their kid in. So we've some of these guys are actually still working in the community with us. So yeah, you can tell by their faces that they're very proud of their work and very proud of the changes that they've made in their lives.
Thanks so much, Sean. That's inspiring, to say the least. Well, this is, folks, now the time for questions and discussion. Now, I've seen a lot of questions that have been put up, and Aaron, you've been very adept at answering them very efficiently.
I wasn't sure if that was what I was supposed to do or not, but I took a crack at it.
I think that was absolutely perfect. I think everybody would agree on that. So Michael Toy has a question there for you, Sean, trying to say, okay, you're doing retrofits on water. Has Bill started to consider the kind of community energy or solar aggregation like push, or is that on the radar?
We've definitely explored solar. We have a loose partnership with a solar provider in Winnipeg. The struggle that we have is Manitoba is a provider of hydroelectric power, and it's very it's cheap. Our two competitors for solar would be hydroelectric, which is very cheap in Manitoba, and natural gas, which is even cheaper. So economically, it's difficult. Our target market would have to be people who are outside of our community impact catchment. It would be considerably wealthier people who would be able to afford it. We've looked at solar hot water tanks as an option. It's expensive, but again, we haven't had a huge push for it. For energy production, financially, economically, it's not massive. Now, that said, there are other things that Build's partners. So Build is kind of like the grandmother social enterprise in Manitoba. Some of our partners, like the social enterprises that have been offshoots of Build, there's one called AKI Energy, A-K-I Energy, and everybody should look them up on the internet. They're incredible. They're like Build on First Nations, and they go up and they start geothermal companies in First Nations communities. They negotiate geothermal install rates to be lower because they do it obviously on bulk for a whole community at a time. So they bring it all down. It's paid for under the PAYS finance, so it becomes cost neutral for the community, and carbon obviously decreases dramatically. Also financially, it makes a lot of sense. You don't have to bring the big power lines in and the gas lines in. They also have some solar installed. So yeah, I would we look for opportunities, but it doesn't always make sense for Build to capitalize on the opportunities. It sometimes has to be one of our partners.
Okay, Sean. Good. Thank you. That's very very good response to Mike's question. Just one question around the employment side. Build, from what you've said, Sean, is focused on the social enterprise and kind of feeding people into that social enterprise and building the employment strategy through the social enterprise. I noted, Aaron, that in your strategy, you're building several social enterprises that link up with kind of the revitalization and greening of the community. But you also make mention of linking your training and employment programs to placing people with what you call high-end contractors. That's kind of a different strategy than Build at this point. Do you have any comments, either one of you, about that?
Yeah, so you're right. We have different employment strategies for different sectors. So in the green infrastructure sector with Push Blue, we actually employ our workers directly, and we serve as the contractor with our clients, but the largest one being the city's sewer authority. In the weatherization sector, we've built a table or an alliance of small contractors in doing retrofits, and we do not perform the work ourselves. So we feed our trainees through their networks as we build the sector with them. So, you know, our role is again, marketing and client advocacy and advocacy with the state. And then in that case, the contractors, once they've signed what we call our high road labor agreement, are put on the list to receive the aggregated bundles. And that's the same both in the retrofit sector and now the new solar aggregation program that we're running.
Just one other quick question, an important one, I think, embedded in what both of you said, is that in Manitoba, obviously the state, through various public agencies or crown corporations, have been playing a key role, if you will, in through procurement and linking it to Build's objectives around employment of people who are marginalized from the labor force. Is there any more that you can say? Well, I was very impressed with the kind of advocacy piece that Push is involved in. Is there breakthroughs there that link to your community organizing and, quote, building power, people power, that have led to important breakthroughs from a point of view of financing that have had an impact on your ability to scale?
Just two things come to mind. One is just on the financing. Yes, as a result of a statewide campaign, we weren't the only party that was allied in this campaign. We did win on-bill financing in New York State, so customers can finance the retrofits, including solar, onto their utility bills if the numbers of a particular job work out. So there's no need to bank finance if one qualifies for on-bill finance. So that is beginning to help with scale. There have been a little bit of hiccups because of how low the natural gas prices fell that sort of messed the numbers up a bit. But now that's gaining traction again. And then I would just say one other quick thing, which is on the advocacy and connecting it to the employment of vulnerable workers. We have done a lot of work increasingly this past year around setting standards for subsidized real estate development across the region. So when a big skyscraper is being built, we don't have that many of them here, but we do have a bit of a building boom. Often in New York State, they're subsidized through tax breaks or what have you. We've begun to win some standards on those subsidies that would force the diversification, racial diversification of work sites in the construction sector. And we're there building a social enterprise to provide that labor as well. So there's an interplay between those two activities.
Very good.
We've seen similar things. A thing that we've been pushing at Build, and a lot of our partner agencies have been pushing, is a thing that we call the social benefits clause in tendering. And we've seen it. I think we've secured 3 contracts in the past year through this, where a large project is happening, but the organization or the company or the Crown Corporation who puts out the tender, they have a social benefits clause where the general contractor has to prove that in some way they have the community in mind. And sometimes that means working with social enterprise. Sometimes that just means they have a strong apprenticeship program or whatever. And we've been able to really capitalize on that. And we're hoping that will continue as a trend in the private construction industry, which is great. Because like the expression that we say sometimes is that, like, while these guys are supposed to be maximizing their shareholder value, they should also be reflecting their shareholder values. And like, shareholders are not all terrible people. Some of them have like really good consciences, and they want to see communities better. But also in public procurement, that there would be a procurement policy that would include working with social enterprise and having community benefits clauses in all of their public tendering, which we would love to see, and there is some movement on that, because like any money that comes, this is money that would have been spent anyways on private contractors. If it goes to guys like us, then you're spending less money on jail and less money on social assistance, less money into all these other services, and it's just giving people jobs and making people and putting people in a better position financially and for their families and for generations to come.
I think that this question of how to organize on a broader basis in both neighborhoods and communities and linking up these major projects. We had a meeting of a variety of networks around the people-centered economy a couple of weeks ago, and one of the people talked about the organizing around a new transportation infrastructure related to rapid transit, that they were able to, in fact, organize on a broad community coalition basis what they call a community benefits agreement. And it seems to me that is one of the areas, as we think about how we link up environmental justice, new investment in infrastructure, some of it larger, some of it more community-based, but that, in fact, the communities where this infrastructure is being put in can be linked back, to community benefit, including the kinds of benefits each of your organizations are advancing. So anyway, yeah, wow, that was great, folks. We're kind of rolling up here to 10 o'clock in the morning here, 1 o'clock for some of you, and I don't know all the different time zones. I really want to thank both of you for the kind of ground you covered. I think it stimulated a number of questions and very efficient in the answers. So thank you. And there's some links here that you can learn more about the organizations that each of our presenters is playing a central role in. And we encourage you as well to kind of follow the links on the next page if you'd like to stay in touch with, CED-related issues. Check out CEDNet's website, sign up for the newsletters. And in any case, and you should just have received an email with a link to a 1-minute evaluation survey. So take a second, fill it in, and give us the feedback. That would be terrific. Well, anyway, thank you so much, Aaron and Sean, and thanks to all of you for your enthusiasm and questions and participation. Webinar recording will be posted on the website in a few days, and you'll be sent a link as soon as it's available. Okay, thank you.